Hi guys, so in this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to do a 3D metallic text effect in Adobe Illustrator. So we're going to start off with Adobe Illustrator on the iPad where we're going to be creating the lettering for our design, and then we're going to move on to Adobe Illustrator on the desktop where we can apply the 3D effects. So let's get started. So let's start off with Adobe Illustrator on the iPad. I have Adobe Illustrator opened up already. What we're going to do is just open up a new file. So I'll go ahead and select your letter size, 1080 by 1920. Totally up to you the size that you want to do it. I'm just doing it in this size because that's my original size that I made it in. So what we're going to do is I wanted to do that, funky, almost wavy, liquidy type of lettering. So all I'm doing is I'm grabbing the pencil tool here and I want to make sure that the outline is black and the fill is white. So it should look something like this. I'm going to increase our stroke thickness so you guys can see it better on the screen to about 6 points. And I'll go ahead and delete that and we'll go ahead and select the pencil. And again, the quote that I was working on said shine on girl, so I'm going to do that same thing. What we're going to do is we're just going to write it, the S, and you're just drawing these letters. It doesn't have to be super perfect. We want it to look kind of like liquidy. Now the thing when you do use the pencil tool in Adobe Illustrator on the iPad is it's not going to connect your paths. So if we zoom in here, our paths are not connected. So I'll double tap to undo. What we have to do is select those two paths and we're going to select on the path options here and click on join path. And then we're going to have to go in here and delete some of these and then we'll adjust it by grabbing the handles and we'll zoom out here and you can see how that looks. And then we'll continue for the rest of our words. So just doing it the whole way through, trying to make it wavy for the H. And again, selecting those two anchor points and joining them. When you join them, you have to go ahead and delete some of these anchor points because it changes the look of your design. So I'm going in and just adjusting my anchor points, deleting them, and also playing around with the handles of some of these anchor points to make my letter a little bit more flowy. You can adjust your paths like this. You can also stretch it out a bit more, make it fit in our design. And then we'll continue with the rest of our words. So we need to do the I, and I did a little heart for the top part, and we'll connect the paths when we're done here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to select our path tool. So the path tool allows us to add, delete, or modify anchor points to change the shape of our design. But right now I'm using the path tool to select the two anchor points that need to be combined. So remember, we're going to select the two anchor points, select path, and then join those paths. So that way they are all one single path. So once I'm done joining those paths, I have to go in with the path tool and adjust those anchor points. So all I'm doing is I'm selecting anchor points, deleting them, or modifying them by grabbing the anchor point or adjusting the handles. You can also pull on the corner tool, that little circle here, to create really round edges from corners. And again, all I'm doing is just removing and adjusting these anchor points because whenever we join paths, sometimes it creates like really jagged edges that I want to go in and fix. For example, this E, that inner portion of the E, there's a really sharp edge. I'm going to have to go in there and using the path tool, delete that extra anchor point. Next, what we have is we have the E, and this is technically two shapes, the circle and then the outline of the E. We're going to have to use our shape builder to make this into an actual E. What we're going to do is we're going to select both of these shapes and we're going to select the shape builder tool here and we're going to select exclude overlap. So exclude overlap allows us to exclude the intersected region of two overlap shapes. So now that I've done that, when I add color, it's only adding color to that inner portion of the E and not that circle within the E. I'm going to continue drawing my letters for Shine On Girl, and I'm going to speed up this process. I'm not combining any of the paths or joining any of the paths. I'm just going to draw out the shapes of the letters first, and then we'll move on to joining those paths. We're just about done here. All I have left is my exclamation point and then the little heart to finish it off. And once that's done, all we have to do now is we have to make sure all of our paths are joined, because remember, if we're using the pencil tool in Illustrator, it's not going to combine those paths. So I'm selecting both of those paths that are not connected, selecting path, and then clicking on join path. So I'm just going to do this for all of my paths here. So for the O, the N, and then the rest of the letters in my design. So now that all my paths are joined, you can see there is some jagged edges. I'm going to have to go in with my path tool and adjust those anchor points. So all I'm doing is selecting anchor points, deleting them, or modifying them. And remember, you can grab the handles to adjust the curve of your path. But again, also you can just delete them if you want to. So I'm continuing just adjusting the paths. I'm going to speed up this process in a second, but I wanted to show you guys one more thing you can do with your anchor points. If I have an anchor point here, I can actually double tap it to make it a curve or a pointed. So you see I double tapped on it and it created a curve or a pointed. So it just depends on if your path is already pointed or curved. When you double tap on it, it's going to create the opposite of that. Okay, so we're pretty much done with that portion. Now all we have to do is we do have to fix our O and G because we have to exclude the overlap here. And then we can also make some adjustments, and we can also add some hearts. So with the O, you can see here, these are two separate shapes. We're gonna have to use the same process using our shape builder, selecting the two shapes, and then we're going to select the exclude overlap. But if you can see here, if I select both of the shapes and add color to them, they are portraying themselves as two separate shapes. So we have to select both of them and select our shape builder tool and then just select exclude overlap. Now when I add the fill, it should only be for that main shape of the O. And I'm going to do the same thing for the G again, select our combine shape tools, and we're going to select the exclude overlap. So now our letters are done. All we have to do is we have to add some hearts. So I'm just duplicating the hearts, and then I'm going to grab them and move them around and rotate. And you can see here, once I start trying to adjust the size by grabbing a corner, it's a bit of a pain because I'm changing the shape. What you could actually do is, instead of just grabbing the corner and adjusting the shape or the size that way, what we can use is our transform tools, and I'll show you that right now. I'm going to duplicate this heart, and then we'll go to our properties and our transform tools, and we'll lock this here. And then that means we're going to have a proportional increase or decrease in size when we increase the width or the height. So I'm just going to grab the width here and drag to the right, and you'll see it's increasing the size of my heart while maintaining the size proportionally. And we'll do the same thing for this other heart. I can rotate it, or I can adjust the size with my properties panel with the transform tools. So that looks good. I think the last bit that we have to do here is just make a couple of adjustments for our layout. I want to make sure the girl portion is centered as well as the O and the N. So I'm just going to make sure to select just the O and the N on my design and then just center it on my page. So that looks good to go. It seems like it's ready. And luckily for us, Adobe Illustrator saves our artwork to the cloud if you do pay for Adobe Creative Cloud. So now it should be saved onto the cloud. So what I'm going to do is I'll go back to my main gallery of my designs. And you can see here, that means it's not synced to the cloud. So we just have to make sure it's syncing to the cloud. And the check mark means that it's synced to the cloud. So now if I open up my desktop version of Adobe Illustrator, this should be on there. So let's move on to the desktop. So now I'm going to go ahead and open up Adobe Illustrator on my desktop, and that document should appear in my library. So now when I open up Adobe Illustrator on my desktop, you'll see I have the file here. It's been saved to the cloud. I'll go ahead and open it up. So here I have my file, and I'm going to show you guys how to make that 3D shiny text effect using Adobe's 3D tools. So it's super, super simple. It depends on the colors that you want to use. Feel free to choose the colors to your liking. I'm going to go ahead and select the original ones that I was working with the last time. So I have my design here and I went ahead and added the colors that I used for the original design. So these are the colors in case you guys want to use them. I'll make them larger so you can see how they look, and you can see the hexadecimal codes on here if you want to use these same colors for your design. So for the background, I have this light pink. So on a new layer, I'm just going to lock this layer, we'll create a new layer right below it, and we will add a background with that lighter pink. I'll make sure it's that light pink, and then we'll go ahead and lock that layer. And on this new layer, I like to make sure I have an extra copy of my design just in case I want to undo something. We can also remove 3D effects really easily, but I'm just going to make a copy of it just in case. So what we'll do is we'll grab this layer here and drag it to the plus sign here, and that will make a copy of that layer. So now if I hide this one, we'll work with this one up here. And what I want you to do is select all of your letters and art here and just make sure that they have no outline. And then we're going to add some colors here. So I want the shine to be this darker pink and all the hearts to be a red. And then on I want it to be red. And then this portion pink as well, that darker pink. I also did add some stars, so I'll go ahead and grab my star tool and we'll just add a star here. I'll zoom in here and I'm just going to click on A, the selection tool, and let's pull down the corner widget to make them more rounded. And I'll make it a little bit smaller and I'll rotate. We can pull this one down here if we want to. So something like that. We can always add more if you want. If you want to add more to your design, feel free to do so. So I think this looks good. We can make some adjustments. I think I'm going to pull this end down just a little bit. Okay, so I think that looks good. So now let's move on to the 3D portion of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with bits and pieces at a time because the rendering process can take a little bit of time the more you're trying to render at the same time. So we're going to do a little bit at a time. Let's start off with the star. So we'll start off with the star, and I just want you to click on inflate and just make sure the depth is set to 10 and then taper and volume are set to 100%. And we're going to do the same thing for the rest of our work. So just click on inflate and make sure those settings are the same. So I'm just going to speed this up, but I'm just going to make sure all of the rest of my letters and shapes are just inflated using the 3D panel. Okay, so now we've made an inflated text effect here. Next, what we're going to do is we want to adjust the materials. So automatically you should have the materials set to default. So if I select the star, it should be set to default. And if I scroll down here, let me pull up my 3D materials onto the screen. I'm going to increase metallic. Let's put it to at about 97. So I'm going to increase it to 0.97. I'll go ahead and copy that so I can apply it to the rest of my artwork. We're going to apply 0.97 metallic to every single one of these. So if you see here, if I select all of these, it won't let me adjust the properties for so many. So again, I have to do a couple at a time. So for this one, I can only do the E by itself. So I'll select the E and apply the same metallic properties. And I'm going to speed up this portion while I'll add the metallic properties to the rest of my letters and shapes. But you can pretty much get the gist of it. I'm just applying the 0.97 metallic setting. The next step that we have to do is we need to adjust the lighting. So now that we have the object set to inflated, we have the materials set to default and the metallic set to 0.97. Now we're going to go to lighting. So I want you to select the objects and make sure you have these settings set up on the screen here. So intensity 70%, rotation 145, height 45, and softness 40%, and ambient light and 50% intensity. Feel free to play around with these settings when you're done just to see how it changes the way your design looks. But for the most part, all I want you to do is just turn on shadow. So just make sure shadows are turned on and it should be behind object. And you should be able to see that the distance from object is 0 and the shadow bounds are set to 146. So we're going to do this for all of our letters. Okay, so now that that's done, It should look something like this. You might want to pull down your design a little bit just to center it on the page. All we have left is to render our design. So rendering allows us to create a realistic 3D graphic of our artwork. So all we have to do is click on this little button up here and this will render the selected artwork. So if we zoom in here on the star, you can see how it looks different from the rest of our pieces. So we'll select the heart, and if I actually click on this drop-down menu, we can actually adjust the settings, so the quality of our render, low, medium, or high. You can adjust the noise. All these details are in here if you want to play around with them. But I'm just going to click on render, and for the rest of my designs, I'm just going to select the object, and I'm going to click on the icon to render it. And I already have my settings set up, so I'm just going to click on this icon to render my selection. So depending on the complexity of your object, rendering can take a second. So I'm just going to speed up this portion. That way we're not sitting through a bunch of loading screens. But yeah, it's going to take a second to render your objects depending on how complex they are. And now that all of my pieces are rendered, this is the final look. And you can see here, it looks really cool. Very simple way to apply this effect to your lettering. Essentially what we did is we created the lettering in Adobe Illustrator on the iPad, and then we applied some 3D effects using Adobe Illustrator on desktop. So really, really cool feature that you guys should definitely try out, the 3D and materials. I recommend playing around with the settings such as the lighting and the materials just to see how it changes the way your artwork looks. But yeah, that's how you can accomplish this 3D metallic text effect using Adobe Illustrator.